it's Ty and welcome back to my channel. So today I'm going to be doing another Stephen King book / movie review, and at this point I've done several of these on my channel and I will have a playlist linked down below in case you guys are interested. But how this will typically work is I will start off with a very brief synopsis over the book, and then I will jump straight into spoilers over the book and the movie, and then at the end of that I will give some more in-depth thoughts over the book, and then I will give you guys my star rating, and then I will let you guys know whether I would recommend the book or the movie. And so before I jump into spoilers, I will definitely leave like a little banner up throughout the whole time I'm giving spoilers, just so that you guys are fully aware. I'll also let you guys know when I jump into spoilers, and then I will also have timestamps so that you guys will not be spoiled for anything if you don't want to be. So we will go ahead and get started. So the book that I'm going to be talking about today is Stephen King's Firestarter. And so this actually follows our two main characters by the name of Andy McGee and his young daughter Charlie. And at the very beginning of this book, they are on the run from this government agency called The Shop. And we learned very early on in this story through flashback scenes that when Andy was in college, where he met his wife Vicky, they were involved in this experiment by The Shop. And during that experiment, him and Vicky actually gained like these psychic abilities, and they ended up passing those abilities on to their daughter Charlie. But Charlie actually ended up getting this ability called pyrokinesis, where she is able to start fires. And so throughout this book, we are following Andy and Charlie as they are on the run from The Shop. And while they're on the run, we are seeing Charlie as she is trying to control her ability, and we're also watching as Andy is using his ability as well. So that is the basic premise of this book, and we'll jump into the spoilers for the movie and the book as well. Okay. So jumping right into spoilers, the book was actually published in 1980, and then the movie came out in 1984. And then really, the movie obviously has a lot of characters, but like I said with the book, the movie has two primary characters. So our main character, which is the father, Andy McGee, is played by David Keith. And then his young daughter, Charlie McGee, is played by the fabulous Drew Barrymore, obviously when she was much younger. Now, I mentioned this at the very beginning of my video, where I said that I've done several of these at this point, where I've reviewed the book and the movie for several of Stephen King's books at this point. And this is the first time where I have to say that they pretty much followed the book very well. So I don't really have much to like point out, so I won't really be spoiling too much here. And I'm actually pretty surprised, because usually I have a lot to say during this point because so much changes between the movie and the book. The stuff that I'm going to point out here is like minor stuff that they changed besides the ending of this, and something that I feel like that they left out, which I can probably understand why they left out, but I feel like I have to point it out. So at the very beginning of this movie, the first few scenes, they hit it on the nail. Some of the stuff that I'm going to point out is so minor, but I feel like I just want to point it out just to point it out. So it's mentioned a lot in the book, and this is throughout the book, but I noticed it pretty early on, that anytime that Andy uses his power, and his power is they say like it's some like sort of like psychic ability, but he's able to use his mind to make people do what he wants them to do. But anytime he uses that ability, he ends up getting like these really debilitating headaches. But in the movie, instead of getting headaches, he gets nosebleeds, which I can understand why they made that change, because we can see him getting nosebleeds. We can't see him getting a headache. So I can understand why they did that. Now, what I thought was funny, because I don't remember them saying this in the book, like every time that he used his power, he would put his hand on his head and do one of these. Which like took me out the first time. That like literally took me out the first time I saw him do that, because I was like, what is he doing? But Okay, I guess he was doing that to let us know that he was using his power, but it cracked me up because I was like, dude, okay. And then, so in the very first like couple of scenes when they're running from the agents from the shop, they're at the airport, and like I said, this is like so minor, but they're at the airport and they're trying to get money, and this was kind of like a long scene in the book, but they're at the airport, and you know, Charlie is like really conflicted about whether or not she wants to use her power because her dad keeps telling her that it's bad. You know, you don't want to use your powers. There's like a good bad and a bad bad. And she's like, is this a good bad or is this a bad bad? But he's like, we need money. So this is going to be a good bad. So you need to go get us some money. Well, in the book, Charlie is seen going to the payphones and like using her psychic abilities to like extract the quarters from the payphones. But in the movie, she's following her dad and he's the one that's getting the money out of the payphones. Like I said, not a big deal. But while that is happening and while I'm bringing it up is because she actually uses her pyrokinesis in the airport. And in the book, while she's getting the money from the payphone, she actually overhears this guy having an argument on the phone. And she doesn't like the way that he's talking to whoever he's talking to on the phone. So she ends up setting his feet on fire. Well, in the movie, this guy isn't on the phone. He's actually talking to his girlfriend or his significant other face to face. And she isn't liking how he's talking to her. So she ends up setting his feet on fire right there in front of them. And he has to run to the bathroom and stick his feet in the toilet to get his feet out, to set the fire out. So that was like a little different. Again, wasn't that significant, but it definitely was a difference. So I did kind of mention this briefly in my brief synopsis of the book, but this does go back and forth at certain points in like flashback scenes. We do see that in both the book and the movie. Now in the book, they kind of make it seem as though her parents, Andy and Vicky, are kind of like scared of Charlie when they first find out that she has these abilities, and they're not really sure what to do, and they're like trying to like make sure that the shop doesn't find out that she has these abilities. But in the movie, there's a scene where Andy is actually trying to teach her how to control her power, which, I mean, that's fine. She technically does need to know how to control her power, but that's totally different from how it's portrayed in the book, because they made it seem like they were terrified of her, but in the movie, he was like, yeah, she can start fires, so let's teach her. Now, her mom, in both situations, seemed terrified of the little girl, but he just seems like he was on board with it. He wanted her to use it. He wanted her to control it. So it was kind of like they made it seem how they portrayed her parents was totally different from the movie versus the book. So there was a scene that was definitely changed up between the book and the movie. And this was a scene where her mother was killed by the shop. And when her mother was killed in the book, Charlie was actually kidnapped when she was much younger by the shop. And when she was kidnapped, she was taken to a rest stop, and Andy actually found them at the rest stop. It was this whole big thing. He had to actually use his ability there and kind of, obviously he had to get her back. But in order to get her back, he had to like, this isn't going to be the right word for this, but he had to like brainwash everybody else that was at this rest stop so that they wouldn't realize like what was going on in order for him to get Charlie back. But in the movie, they didn't even make it to the rest stop. So he found his wife in the same place that he found her in the book. But in the movie, he found his wife, And then he found Charlie. It was a whole big thing about, you know, she was taken in this gray van. So they still had the gray van. But instead of him finding her at a rest stop, he found her at the home where they got her from. And it wasn't like this big scene like it was in the book. It was just, he came across the agents like he did in the book, but he didn't have to like brainwash all these other people. I think it was like just one neighbor that witnessed everything, and he just told her, oh ma'am, go back in the house. And then he used his little psychic abilities on these two agents, grabbed Charlie and was out, and that was that. So it wasn't this big scene like it was in the book. It was just kind of like, okay, I got my daughter and I'm out. There's another scene that sort of happened the same, but it was some stuff that they changed that I didn't understand why they changed. This is why I don't understand why when they're doing stuff from book to movies, like why they change certain stuff. Like some stuff I understand and other stuff I don't understand. So in the book, there is this scene where Andy and Charlie, still on the run, they end up getting picked up by this really nice man, by Irv Manders, and then Irv takes them back to his farm, and they ended up having a nice lunch with his wife. But then the members from the shop end up coming, and Charlie like unleashes her powers on the shop. But how it played out in the book and how it played out in the movie are two totally different things. So how it played out in the book is that the shop members came, and she ended up setting a lot of those men that came to the house on fire. She ended up blowing up their cars. She ended up setting Irv Mander's chickens on fire. She ended up setting the guy's house on fire. And then Andy had to slap her in order to get her under control. So she was like out of control at this point and wasn't able to control her power. But in the movie, she was able to set some of the guys on fire, and she was able to set the cars on fire, and then she was able to just stop and control herself. And that was it. We didn't see her set the chickens on fire, yet there were chickens. We saw there was chickens. She played with the chickens, but she didn't set any of the chickens on fire. The guy's house didn't get set on fire, and Andy didn't slap her. I don't understand why like those things were changed. I think it would have added to the movie because the whole thing was about her trying to control her powers. That would have been a good point to bring out that she can't control her powers. So I don't understand why we had to change that, but it was definitely changed. So then we start to learn that the shop is still plotting on how they are about to try and capture Andy and Charlie. And so one of the guys, this really like scary, intimidating guy by the name of Rainbird ends up killing the main doctor. His name is Dr. Wainless. His name is Dr. Wainless. And he was the main guy that did the experiment back when Andy was in college. And in the book, Rainbird is seen standing over Dr. Wainless's bed. And we know he's about to kill him. But before he kills him, he wants to get all this information on Charlie because for some reason, like he's like obsessed with Charlie and her abilities. And we know that the shop wants to do all this testing on Charlie. And he's like, you know what? I'll help you get Andy and Charlie. And then once you guys do your testing on her, I want her. I want to be able to do what I want with her and then kill her. But I want her. So he goes to Dr. Wainless, whatever that doctor's name is. He goes to him in the middle of the night. And right before he kills him, he gets all this information. He wants to know the ins and outs of what happened to Charlie, what her power is, why it is that y'all want her, and then he kills him. Makes sense. You're obsessed with her, so you want to get all this information on her. Makes sense to me. I mean, it doesn't make sense why you want to kill her, but it makes sense that you would want all this information on her so that you know what you're getting yourself into. In the movie, all we see is him standing over this doctor's bed and just like karate chops him in the nose, and he's dead. He didn't get any information from him or nothing. This man barely even said 2 words to him and he kills him. Maybe he got it before we saw it, but I don't understand why it didn't make sense for him to kill him like that, because the two barely even had interactions at this point in the movie. But okay. So there's also a scene where Charlie and Andy got to, like, I think it was like her grandfather's like boathouse, something or other, and they're just chilling out, waiting, and Andy's like whole mission is to like try to like report everything that is going on to like the newspapers, so they can get this story out there of what's happening to them and about the shop and this experiment, so that they can get this agency group shut down. So he had written these letters, hoping to make it to some sort of news outlet, and in the book, those letters were just intercepted by the shop. They just went to the mailbox and picked them up. Makes sense, right? You knew which mailbox he put them in. You just went and grabbed them. In the movie, they killed the mailman. Like, why did you have to kill the man? Just grab the letters. Like, I don't Okay. Kill the mailman. Well, okay. Another just small thing that happened before I get to the big shebang. Another small thing that happened was that we know once Andy and Charlie are captured by the shop, they are separated, and they are both refusing to be tested on. Charlie is all upset, and she's like, I'm never using my powers again. I want to see my daddy. You guys aren't going to make me use my powers. These are bad. I can't control it. I'm never going to use it. And Andy then got all doped up on drugs that they're giving him, and he can't use his powers. So they're just screwed. So eventually, Rainbird has gotten close to her and is trying to talk her into using her powers and manipulate her. And so she ends up going through with the testing. And so we see her go through one test in both the book and the movie. But then in the movie, we see her go through an extra test. And through this extra test that we see her go through, she's able to use her powers and set like cinder blocks on fire. That's neat, because I've never seen cinder blocks go up in flames before, so that was pretty cool. But in the book, we only see one of her tests that takes place, but we just hear that she has gone through other testing. So in the movie, we see an extra set of tests. In the book, we only see one. So here's always my favorite part of this, is the endings, because we always know they can't ever do those the same, right? So which one do I want to start with? We'll start with the movie. So in the movie, the ending was, well, not the ending, the big scene at the house, the facility, the place where they've been keeping Charlie and Andy. So everything kind of like goes down in like the stables where she's been like kind of like riding these horses. Well, she goes to the stables to meet her dad. She's finally able, they've concocted this plan where she can meet her dad. And Rainbird, the shop guy, is still manipulating her at this point, and she's still believing that he's like her friend when really he's just using her and wanting her to go through these tests so that at the end of this he can do what he wants with her and kill her. So there, she's in the stable, she's waiting for her dad. Her dad gets there with this other guy by the name of Cap, who also works for the shop. So they all are in this stable. And so her dad finally tells her, like, hey, Rainbird, aka John, because that's really what he told her his name was, that's not who you think he is. So he's been using you. He works for the shop, and you shouldn't believe what he's telling you. And she's like, oh, what? He's not my friend. That's not who I think it is. And her dad's like, no. So Rainbird shoots the other guy, Cap, in the head. Andy uses his power on Rainbird, because Rainbird is like up in like these rafters or whatever, and so he uses his power and makes Rainbird fall off these rafters, or fall out of the like rafters, and he falls down. He breaks a leg, but then while he falls down, he broke his leg. He uses his gun and he shoots Andy in the neck. And then Andy gives his like last speech and is like, oh, you know, don't let these people get you, Charlie. Use your powers. Make them regret everything that they put you through. And now Charlie's like pissed. Like she's mad. And she's about to go on this rampage. And so then, you know, Rainbird, now he looks scared. And then she like uses her little flamethrower stuff. And like she sets him on fire. And then she walks out the door of this stable, and then she's like setting all these people on fire, and she's just going insane. That's what happens in the movie. In the book, it's a little bit different. just like a tad bit different. So we're gonna rewind, and we're all in the stables. All in the stables again, okay? Okay. So in the book, Andy had already told Charlie about Rainbird. And she already knows that Rainbird isn't who he says that he is. So she's already pissed at this point. She's mad. She's in this stable fuming. And Rainbird kind of can sense that she's mad and like trying to talk her over to his side, but it's not really working. But then Cap, that other guy that I told y'all was in there with them, he's played like a bigger part than what he's played in this movie, in the book. So, but Andy has already been using like his abilities on him in the book. And he's been like losing his mind towards the end of this book. And he's afraid of snakes. And he's been thinking that he's been seeing snakes. And so while they're in the stables, this man then thought that he's seen a snake. And it like freaked him out, and he started screaming, but it wasn't a snake. It was like a hose. And so he's screaming, and it then threw everybody off because everybody's like, what the heck is he screaming at? And so Andy had tried to use his power on Rainbird, but Rainbird could kind of sense it, and he moved out of the way. But him moving out of the way caused him to fall, and that's how he broke his leg. And because he fell, he missed his shot, and he shot Andy in the neck. And when Andy got shot in the neck, that's when that whole scene with him talking to Charlie happened. And, you know, telling her, you know, don't let the shop use you and yada, yada, yada. And she got all mad. Of course, Andy did die after being shot in the neck. In both situations, he did die. And that's when she got all mad, set him on fire, set Rainbird on fire, and then her whole rampage at the stables and in the whole like little facility where they were staying at, and her setting everything on fire. That's when all of that happened. Now, from how it was described, I actually liked seeing it in the movie. Little Drew Barrymore, she was pissed, okay? And I liked that scene. Now, after she left the place where they were being held, she ended up going back to the farm with Irv Manners and his wife, and she had a few injuries. At least that's what happened in the book. In the movies, she still went to the farm, but it was dragged out in the book, obviously. And in the book, she went to the farm. She had some injuries. She was getting over the injuries, and there was this whole thing about some rumors started because people found out that she was staying there, and the shop was now after her again, and she had to leave the Manners a note and leave. In the movie, they skipped over all of that, and she just showed up at the farm. The movie was dang near over. But remember how I said that Andy's whole goal was to kind of let the media know what was happening to them, and to let the people know about the shop and the experiment? Well, that's what she wanted to do. She wanted to go to some media outlet and let them know what was going on. So in the movie, how it ended was, after she pretty much destroyed the place where they were keeping her, she showed up at the farm, And Irv Manders ended up taking her to the New York Post. We see them walk into, we see him open up the door to the Post. The movie is over. In the book, she ends up leaving them a note saying that she can't stay there any longer. She goes to the public library, asks for this address that we don't know where she's asking for the address to. We find out that the address that she asked for is the address to Rolling Stone. And she goes to Rolling Stone, tells the receptionist that she needs to talk to one of the writers because she has something to show them and she has a story to tell. And that's the end of the book. So there is something in the book that they did not put in the movie that I wanted to mention, and it was about another shop member that actually worked a lot with Andy, and I think his name was like Penchant, P-Y-N-C-H-O-T, I think, I don't know, but we find out is a cross-dresser, and Stephen King called him a transvestite in the book, which is weird because I've just never seen or heard anybody actually say transvestite. And Andy in the book uses his power on him, and he ends up like slowly losing his mind, and he commits suicide. And so in the book, they find him in his wife's underclothes, and he had his arm in the garbage disposal, and I guess that's how he committed suicide. I guess he put his arm down there trying to get something or trying to clean something and just never took it out. I guess he bled out. I guess that's what happened. But they took that out of the movie. There was a shop member with that name, but he wasn't like the primary person with Andy in the movie. And no mention of like cross-dressing, like none of that was in the movie. I could probably see why, because to me, when I was reading the book, I was like, why is this? It just seemed odd. It was just like, why is this in here? Like, it just seemed so random that this is what this character is. But okay, I'm just gonna go with it. But that definitely is in the book and not in the movie. I just wanted to put that out there because it was a big part of the book. Not like a huge part in the book, but I mean, it was definitely in the book and is definitely memorable from the book, and they did not put that in the movie. So I just wanted to mention that. But yep, that's everything from the movie. So I'll just go ahead and jump into my final thoughts for the book, my rating, and which of these I would recommend. So when it comes to this book, I honestly think that I was expecting a little bit more from this. It was like one of those things where it was fun like while I was reading it, but it's not something that like is going to stick with me. Definitely didn't stick with me. It was like once I was done with it, I dang near forgot what happened. That is what this book did for me. I also found myself liking the flashback scenes with Andy and Vicky while they were in the middle of like the experiments and learning how and getting like the background of all of the people that were involved in the experiments, what happened to those people, learning about the shop. I enjoyed that stuff more than what was actually going on in the present day. I also, for the most part, enjoyed seeing him and Charlie on the run, more so than when we got to the parts where they were actually stuck at the house/facility where they were being kept, because the story really did slow down at that point. I know I read a few reviews where people were like, I really love Charlie and Andy's relationship, but once you got literally, this book is almost 500 pages. Once you got to about 250 pages, they were separated. And so then they were going through two totally different things throughout the whole book. And she was having more of a relationship between her and that guy Rainbird than she was having with her father. So I didn't feel anything between her and her father, to be honest. At least that's how I felt. So I just didn't feel anything between her and Andy. So this just wasn't, I don't know, this just wasn't, I wasn't getting what I thought I was supposed to get from this story. I did like the parts where Charlie was actually using her powers, and then seeing her struggle with trying to control her powers, and then how guilty she felt every time she had to use it. I did like that, and how she struggled with that. That was interesting to see, especially seeing like a 7-year-old cope with like that kind of guilt. So, I mean, I like those kind of parts, but other than that, this was literally like a middle of the road book for me. But then also too, what kind of brought this down for me, again, Stephen King does what Stephen King does, and he uses random N-words. He uses the word fat a lot in this book. A lot. I don't know if he just likes the word fat or what. He uses the F word in reference to a queer character. Wasn't a fan of that. So I mentioned this in like the last review I did, which was Cujo. I'm not sure if it's just the time period that this is written in. It was in the 80s. I haven't read like any of his recent works, and if this is just something that is just a product of its time. But again, I'm just not a fan of that. But I ended up rating this a 3 stars. This was, like I said, definitely just a middle of the road book for me. I thought it was fine. I didn't really connect with any of the characters, not even Charlie. There was definitely just some things I liked, some things I didn't like. Like I said, once they got to like the housing facility place, it was just a slow read for me. And I think the ending of it dragged out a bit for me. So it was just fine. And if I had to say, if I would recommend for someone to either read this or watch the movie, I would definitely say watch the movie. I'm definitely planning on seeing the remake of this. The remake looks really good. I'm really curious to see how they do a lot of the stuff from this movie, especially in 2022. So really curious for that, but I would definitely say just watch the movie. If you're gonna watch the older version, just watch the movie. The last part of that movie where she is really angry and like Charlie is activated, really love that. Really love the end of that. Love the end of that. So I would definitely say watch the movie. So that is actually all that I have for you guys. And like I said, if you are interested in my other videos that I have done like this, I will leave my playlist down below. And if you guys watch this after you plan on seeing the remake of the movie, if you plan on seeing the remake of the movie, let me know what you guys think of that down in the comments. And I will see you guys next time. Bye.